Welcome back to another fantastic episode of I'm going to Talk and You're going to Listen. Thanks to all my interactions in the chat, CK, Jimmy, and Birio. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for all the responses. Everybody said basically the same thing. I'm not showing up in their queues. I'm not showing up in notifications, and so obviously I said the wrong things, which means I'm saying the right things, which means here we go. So I got a very light novel from Jimmy between last episode. Uh, he said something that somebody else said too, and I can't remember who it was, but I'm gonna kind of read through what he said, and then I'm gonna kind of interject my own thoughts as we go. So he says, might be a long read, but you've inspired me to make the effort and introduce an idea I think you might find interesting. Oh, side note. First of all, I'm glad this even got through. It's been my experience writing even more than a sentence or two just gets auto-deleted. So thank you for taking the time to write this, and I'm glad it got through. Anyway, so here we go. There's a theory, and I'll be the first to admit that I have to still struggle with normalcy bias when considering it, but it explains a lot of what's happening better than, for example, the idea that this is Project 2025 plan for the Christian right to take over. So pause there. I've still noticed on Reddit the lefty loos trying to desperately struggle with trying to make some kind of allegory to Project 2025. They're still struggling to connect those dots, but it's just not fitting together despite their best efforts. And so I definitely agree that I think this is something else. And the Orange Man and everybody else has been trying to distance themselves from Project 2025 also. I think they would just come right out and say it if that's what they were doing, and I don't think it is. I agree that it's something else. Uh, I don't think this is a Christian right takeover either. However, I think that they're struggling very, very hard to try to blame Christians, and maybe we'll talk about that more later. So, 2025 plans for the Christian right takeover that Trump is building an authoritarian regime or any other explanation really, because normally when you're trying to subvert a system, take over a system, or corrupt and twist it to your own benefit, you normally don't blow up the foundations of the system. You infiltrate, corrupt, you don't destroy, because you then weaken the thing you try to make your own. And I'll pause there. I agree, and I think they learned that the hard way with Iraq and Afghanistan and every other sandy place on the planet that they've tried. They realize that Ukraine. They realize that completely replacing something is a mistake. It doesn't work. It usually doesn't work for pretty complicated reasons, but it unilaterally doesn't work. I mean, look what happened in Syria. You can't just like replace it and you got it and then expect it to work. I mean, it takes generations and generations and generations to find out what's going to work based on each culture. So yeah, I'll continue. Annihilation instead of takeover is what's been happening from day one, and that's in regards to what's been happening since January 20th. Demoralization and removal of government workers, useless theater with the 5 questions to show government workers are inefficient bloat are all part of it. And I agree with that. That's exactly what I've been saying. It's to demoralize the lobies, and which gives fuel for the cabal, the corrupt cabal, to keep churn in the lower 80% of the machine. All this does is it just keeps people it keeps the machine going. They want to try to stop the machine. It's like trying to stop like a boiling volcano by like pissing the lava off, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that's a great metaphor, but it yeah, showing it's easy enough to show and prove that the government is wildly inefficient. Everybody already knows that. Um, However, the government is like an unstoppable force and like an immovable wall at the same time. The only way to completely stop it is to shut it down, which we're roughly a week away from. But even that doesn't completely shut it down. And you've even seen just in the last couple of days them talk about how Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and food stamps just keep going no matter what. There's some exceptions, but even with this, within just the last couple of days, even conservatives have absolutely no stomach to shut down Medicare and Medicaid, even though that's what actually needs to happen. And it is terrible. It is going to be an extremely unpleasant thing, and there's a lot of horrible downstream impacts. But in order to fix Medicare and Medicaid, it needs the entire medical industry needs to be completely rebooted, which there's no appetite for. So they just keep slapping bandages on it. Anyway, I'll head down to paragraph 2 here. USAID is a vehicle by which clandestine operations have been funded, aside from the overt soft power of feeding starving African children. This is how we pay off warlords in some lawless areas where we need to mine minerals in the view of China. Oh, side note, yeah, I've been reading, or not reading, I've been watching Blood Diamond 2006. If you've never seen Blood Diamond 2006, it's actually a really crazy movie. It's not what you think it is. Okay, I continue. It's how we pay off warlords in some lawless areas where we need to. Yep, it's how we pay various subversion and propaganda campaigns inside rival nations to weaken morale and promote ourselves. Basically, what RT did for me. RT is roughly that's the Russian news. It's actually pretty good. For many years, for Russia inside America, destroying it destroys our own power and capabilities. So I'll pause. I'll pause there. Um, it's actually amazing reading all the USAID stuff that they were putting money in. I mean, it was almost all psyops. It was almost all to subvert and overthrow other and destabilize and unbalance other countries. Like even the left, even like the furthest of the far left, if they would just pull their heads out of their asses, should be able to see that, like you said, is horrible, horrible idea. I'm sure maybe it did some tiny bit of good somewhere, but I mean, it's almost all unilaterally like psyops to destabilize other countries. You and just rampant money laundering. Um, you'd think that would be something that everybody could agree on. Okay, so I'll continue. Same for CDC, firing all the frontline investigators, the actual top level specialists that spend their time in the Congo, checking on the latest strain of Ebola to see if it's the one that can wipe out our civilization. Those aren't blue haired harpies or DEA hires. They are the ones who make CDC useful. So the only sensible explanation is that this is the first step to destroying the CDC. You make it useless. Then you say, why do we have it? It's useless, and get rid of it. I completely agree. I think there was, and in fact, I just read that thing. Like right after you posted this, I think within a day or so, I had read the news saying that they were trying to strip out the Ebola research, which I think is a horrible idea because if there ever is going to be some kind of extinction level event, it's probably going to be like Ebola adjacent. And if people think that it can't happen here, Ebola has already made it stateside once before. It only takes one bad day on an airplane before we get Ebola here, and then you end up with contact tracing again. Um, And I think you're right. I think CDC has made some really bad missteps in the past that put a target on its back. But I also think that it was weaponized against us at the same time. I think it had plenty of opportunities to do good and instead just became weaponized, just became another puppet of the cabal. And I think, um, likewise, they use it for way too many stupid things like saying firearms or some kind of health epidemic or trying to say like obesity is a disease. They say a lot of weird things. I think that's them also, where it's just like, no, stay in your lane, stay with like extinction level events. And stop lying to people because a lot of people would say right now there's something going around that was already way worse than the Rona, and it hasn't been. It doesn't have a name associated. It doesn't have everybody freaking out about it, even though the symptoms are pretty nasty. Um, anyway, I continue. And there are countless examples, cases where instead of replacing someone with your own yes man, the position is simply destroyed. The institution you could have used for your own means is demolished instead. None of it saves any real amount of money that matters. So destruction is really the end in and of itself. And I don't think they've gotten to that point yet, but I think they're getting to that point. Um, I think I think so far they've managed to keep almost all of the apparatus intact, or at least enough of it to where they could just duplicate it. But like most of the infrastructure they have hasn't been completely destroyed yet. It's just been kind of slowed down. And at least in the CDC's instances of that, I had a feeling they were trying to like stop some kind of like fake virus spreading. I think that's why they jumped on the CDC so fast, or they were trying to stop them from deleting a bunch of stuff. Because here's the thing with the CDC during the Rona, I covered this a lot back then. The CDC during the Rona was changing its website so much that you couldn't track what was really going on. They had basically become this Fauci mouthpiece of whatever they wanted the Rona to do that day was what they would kind of change the website to. And it was like, trust the science, except it was like today's science and yesterday's science would get erased and replaced with today's and replaced with tomorrow's. And the lefty loos would say, well, science is always, they're always learning new things. And that's why you got to trust the science, because science is about, admitting you're wrong and putting out the new information. It's like, no, you just change the word science with change the word truth. It's just today's truth versus yesterday's truth. I mean, they were never really admitting they were wrong. They were just, they had their own reality distortion bubble. And so I think that's why the CDC got curtailed a little bit. But you also have to realize that the truth never did came out. Like, we never knew how much of the CDC like really got the clot shot. You don't really know how much of any of the other adjacent agencies actually got the shot. It's there's a lot of stuff that we'll just never know, and it makes it impossible to trust them. But I agree that they shouldn't be dismantled. I think that they should be brought back to their original infrastructure, and I kind of hope that that's happening, but I don't think it is. I think on any given day we're teetering between it being just completely gutted or dismantled, or all the lobies who actually keep it going, that know how to keep it going, are just going to get removed. And I think the orange man basically told Musk the other day that this needs to be a scalpel, not a hatchet. And there's been um, Musk met with, was it a bunch of senators or something? I can't remember, where they basically said like, this, you need to like tone this down, because there's a lot of people that are like, her, take a hammer to the whole thing. And it's like, that actually, in a lot of ways, if you don't do that really smart, would cause way more harm than good. Because unless, you know, it's kind of like your phone, like restoring your phone or like restoring your computer to like factory settings. That's really more of like what you need. You kind of need to reboot it back to the factory settings. Maybe not the Department of Education, maybe not the EPA, uh, or the ATF, the ones that need to go to sleep, the IRS. But like, you still, yeah, it's, some of them can go to sleep, but some of them need to go back to their factory settings. And I think what you have here, and we'll get into it when I keep reading, is what you have here is people who are trying to get it rebooted back to factory settings, and then people who have already made up their mind that it's useless and just destroying it all. And that's what we're getting into. So the theory, back to reading, the theory that explains it is that the tech oligarchs, with Musk as their face and likely leader, have united, helped to elect Orange Man, and are working with him in order to destroy the current system, fracture the U.S., and rebuild a multitude of a neo-techno feudal fiefdom, which will be run as corporations with the oligarchs as the CEO kings. Now, I said it would sound pretty insane. Side note, this doesn't sound insane. You ended up being the second person in like a week that I think either sent me all this, or it ended up in my feed or something. So you don't sound insane at all. Continue. The idea has been around for a while, pioneered by Curtis Yarvin, a modern writer and political philosopher. His pitch is simple: democracy has failed, it's been corrupted and co-opted, it leads to costly and inefficient system where cronyism and bribery rule the day. Now think of a successful corporation and think of how long and expensive a government project is versus how efficient and fast corporations can do things. And imagine a corporation where the resources of a government, even a local government, not just capital but landed workforce. We already have multinational corporations who earn more per year than the combined GDP of many nations. Imagine what they could do if they had control over even a small piece of the nation the way a government has. So I'll pause there. One of the biggest problems with government that a lot of people don't get is they're ordering things is just like, is broken. Like, them replacing computer systems and stuff is just broken. And I'm not saying that like private or public have any higher or lower security than the other. I think cybersecurity in both private and public is vastly theatrics. But like, the government orders things in bulk, just like the military. Um, Justin Taylor on YouTube just did a video very similarly, actually, of like why the Army infantry and why the Marines use like completely different gear versus their, being hundreds of thousands of them. And likewise, the argument over SIG getting the pistol contract is still hotly debated on YouTube and Twitter, despite people talking about 10-year-old P320s, acting like there hasn't been any like fixes done to the M17 once it went into military contract and stuff. Like, it's the same thing with like computers. Like, the government is buying 100,000 laptops. Okay, it's not the same as like Twitter buying a couple thousand laptops. Okay, it's they're buying laptops on a scale of like hundreds of thousands. They're buying, I don't know. I'm an IT guy, so the laptops is what comes to mind. But there's other stuff too. When they're building a piece of software, it's a piece of enterprise level software that's going to support hundreds of thousands of people. Just look what happened with Obamacare and whatever the name of that website was, the Obamacare website. They're not building. They're not IT, so they're not building the software themselves. They take an off the shelf thing and then they try to configure it as best as they can and hope for the best and hope the websites, are gonna work and stuff and hope the servers and la di da. It's not like Twitter or Twitch or Steam. It's a completely different animal. They're still building, network portals and stuff, but like if Steam gets hacked or if Sony gets hacked for the millionth time, like nobody, I'm not saying Steam has been hacked recently, but like Sony certainly has. Nobody gives a shit. It's like a blip on the radar, but like if the government gets hacked or if like a, sort of like a job searching site, if a job searching or like LinkedIn, I remember when like Monster, some of you may remember that Monster, that job hunting website. I feel like Indeed's been hacked before. That's like really similar to the government, or like when the universities get hacked, or if like Social Security gets hacked, or like if the unemployment office gets hacked. Like there's crazy repercussions for that. It still happens, but just the repercussions are nuts. And so um, the federal level tries to, have different security. They try to have things a little bit more robust. They try to. Whether or not they're successful is, another. But it all revolves around people feeling like the government is like secure and safe and hanging in there and doing its best. A lot of it's security theater, no doubt, but a lot of cyber on the private side is security theater too. And they hire tons of people, and instead of fixing things, they just fire somebody. They don't pour all their money into cyber, or undoubtedly they would just go broke and get hacked anyway. So, um, if you've ever been to like a hackathon or something, you'd notice how you'd know how just ludicrously easy it is to hack into anything. So it's just everyone's got to kind of be on their best behavior. So, but my point is like you could run the government like a corporation, but it would have to have like way less people, and you'd have to be like rapidly iterating IT like crazy, and I don't even know how much e-waste that would be, and not to mention all the buildings. And we'll get into buildings more in a little bit. But so while you do have corporations that make way more money than countries, our government doesn't really make like multi-level national amounts of money. It gets like allocated part of like taxes and tariffs and has to just kind of do its best. That's not to say there isn't waste and fraud and abuse. There's obviously tons. However, nothing's actually being done about that. Nobody's actually gone to jail yet, and I doubt anybody will. Likewise, when you have use it or lose it budget, just similar to like use it or lose it water rights in some places, like there's going to be fraud, waste, and abuse, and it's like that in the military and all too. And a lot of that I've heard, and a lot of that comes from this misnomer that like if you don't use your budget, then you must not need it, which is another logical fallacy that needs to get taken care of. So I'll continue reading. This idea has found appeal among many who would later become tech billionaires of our present. Elon Musk has been a follower of Yarvin since before PayPal. Peter Thiel, another tech oligarch close to Orange Man from the first administration, considers Yavin his personal philosopher. Another fun fact is the two of them are the ones who lobbied Orange Man hard and got him to elected JD as the VP, someone who's denigrated Orange Man and had very little reason to pick him. JD is also referred to Yarvin and his ideas as early as his time in university and as an admirer believer. There's a lot of others I can name, but it's already a long post. Anyone interested can dive deeper. And yes, there's a lot of information online. And yeah, I think how I originally heard it was JD and Musk both talking about Yarvin and saying how they, or maybe, yeah, it could have also been what's that guy that's already done and gone. I already forgot his name. So, um, I guess like where I'm going with this, first of all, is that this was well written. I completely agree. Um, I think the rest of this is kind of just supporting information. Um, and I think kind of the question is like who's who's really who's really in charge. I think that's what all of this boils down to. What's the actual point? What's the actual reason? A lot of people say Musk is in charge. A lot of people say Orange Man's in charge. I would argue that the cabal is in charge. Um, so yeah, if you want, look up Curtis Yarvin and basically, and so thank you, Jimmy, for posting that. Um, what I'll say is that I agree that like this on paper, this looks like they hired kind of like a line of secession of people who all kind of agree with the same thing. I think Trump Orange Man wants to tear a lot of it apart because he took it very personally that a lot of them tried to tear him apart and went through his wife's underwear drawer and a lot of other really inappropriate things that shouldn't have happened. But I think also like there hasn't been a lot of consensus over how to really reboot the three-letter agencies. And they seem to like want to rebuild order from the chaos, but they kind of can't and they kind of don't know how. And I think the next thing that's coming is there's going to be a big reorg. I think they might actually get the EPA soon, and I think they might get the Department of Education soon. I think those could happen. The question is Orange Man going to be able to get Congress in line? And I think what's going to happen is they're going to come to a crossroads on the budget, and I think he's going to say, "Well, what do you care more about, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, disability, and food stamps? Or do you care about the Department of Education, the EPA, the ATF?" And I think what's going to happen is he's going to leverage these things back and forth and back and forth. But he only has 2 years to do it. Like, he doesn't have a lot of time. He's got to leverage these back and forth until he eventually gets back down to the fact that where it's like, okay, now we're back down to only paying Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, the VA. And then I think what he's going to have to do, and this is going to cause massive upheaval, is he's going to have to cut Medicare and Medicaid. Like, he's going to have to. He's going to have to cut Social Security. But I think he's saving it to the very end. But I think by the time we get there, it's going to be, everyone will have come to terms with it by then. And on the private side, this happens a lot. You just never hear about it. Like the big car companies, whenever they buy each other out or whatever, one of the nastiest big debts that they have to buy from each other is everyone's retirement. And I think it's one of the first things they look at. Is just like, how many people's pensions is this company paying, and how many pensions is it going to have to pay? And is there any way that we can get out of having to pay everybody's pensions? Because it's just a massive debt. Pension is just debt. And unless the three letters can figure out a way of eliminating Social Security disability, which the only way to do that would have been to go digital and just wipe it all. And Orange Men said we're not going to be doing that, which is great because digital currency and social credit is terrible. But I feel like that's going to be the direction. That's the only, like, there's no other way to just wipe out the country's debt, because Social Security, disability, Medicare, Medicaid, VA, that's all just debt. It's just pure debt. I've paid into it. I've paid my whole life. Well, guess what? I paid my whole life into unemployment. But do you think they gave a shit when I lost my house? No, they didn't. I couldn't get 100% of my unemployment out and put it towards my house. If I could have, I would have been able to save my house. Okay. You're never getting 100% of what you put in. Like, the money's already gone. It's been spent on other shit. Nobody's going to jail for that. That money's not coming back. Medicare and Medicaid are broken as hell, and they're already talking about how do they try to keep paying doctors enough to keep them in the network, because they can't hold a squirt bottle to the doctors' heads and have them keep Medicare and Medicaid. They already have to upcharge the hell out of everybody else to try to supplement that. So the government is rapidly turning into a corptocracy, which is what I've been calling it forever, where the one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. They want you to do the 5 things every week to prove your usefulness. It's now complete. Dang it, I'm sorry. I know that's loud. That's my chair arm being snappy. They want everyone to do the 5 things to prove your usefulness. It's 100% been said, this is absolutely going into an AI. Through that AI, they said they're going to be able to figure out who's redundant and who's not, and who's doing important stuff and who's not. That's all been leaked. But the reality is, like, the end goal to all of this, after they run it all through an AI, is that they're going to have to eventually run all that data against the private side and realize that everybody in the government left doing important stuff should be making like 30 to 40% more than what they're actually making. I said this a few episodes ago. Everyone's saying that people in the government make too much money. That data is heavily skewed by a few people at the top. That isn't your basic, your basic analyst, and it's certainly not all the paper pushers that are at the bottom. what they really want is they want everyone replaced by AI, and they want everyone replaced by H1Bs. They want to turn the whole thing into a cube prison and force everyone back in the office, except they're saying that they're going to sell the GSA stuff all leaked on accident of like 500 buildings that they were going to try to sell off. Then it was 400 and 300, and then the list disappeared or whatever. But like, if they sell all those buildings, they're just going to have to lease them back, and the money is just going to keep flowing through the ecosystem. The only way to take those buildings out of circulation entirely and legitimately save money would be if they demolished them and turned them into parks or something, and they're not going to do that because the banks and commercial real estate are still in control of everything. And you just look in any major city, especially Piss Town and Seattle, and you'll see that like all these so-called, multinational ultra-rich corporations are all moving out of the cities, but their buildings aren't going anywhere. They're just replicating it. They're just building more buildings, which I guess is good, but they're just more big, commercial leases and pumping more money into the banks. And just like what happened in New York, people are going to go back and they're going to try to use those buildings for homeless or whatever, and they're going to be paying top dollar because they're going to be just laundering more money through the cities, through NGOs and fuck who knows what, because all the corruption in the cities hasn't gone anywhere. There's still like just rampant NGO corruption, and that's insane. It's absolutely insane. Like, this federal level corruption is effectively just memes. Meanwhile, the cities are still insanely corrupt. They're still snubbing their noses at ICE left and right. They're still trying to force everybody back. There's no food. There's no security. There's no safety. There's still tents and meth and fentanyl everywhere. There was 3 people shot and killed overnight the other night in Piss Town. Total lawlessness. And they keep trying to force everybody back. And they're trying to force everybody back that work for the cities and that work for the counties and that work for federal. But federal is selling all their buildings. So, like, what are they going to do? They're going to, like, reorg and restructure everybody, and everybody's going to have to end up back at home, right? Or they're just going to keep playing musical chairs forever. And I think what this reminds me of the most on the private side is it has been historically shown that companies, whenever they buy like their huge brand new building, is just right before they go under because of how like ludicrously they're mismanaging money. And I think the problem with GSA is they run the leases on federal buildings. They don't have anybody to release these buildings to. Like, the cities are dead. They're dead, and they just don't know it yet because it's only lefties there that are the diehards. They grew up there, their houses are paid off. They go outside with their rose-colored glasses in their rose city, and they turn a blind eye to the insanity going on. People are getting just straight up murdered all around them, the vandalism happening all around them, and they just put on their smiley faces and they take their prescription medications and they just keep voting for the same people. Like, and the rest of us are asked to share in these like psychotic delusions. But make no mistake, like, corporate does the same thing. Was it like Meta, where like the Meta employees were like sleeping outside in RVs because there was just nowhere to live? And so they don't pay their employees enough to live in the area they live in, and then they guilt the shit out of them for wanting more money. And then they threaten you with H-1Bs and AI. And so, like, I think it was Meta the other day, they were telling them they need to work 60-hour weeks and Saturdays and Sundays to build the AIs that are going to be replacing all of them. That is the future that we have to look forward to. Can a lot of the government be ran with an AI? Probably. But is that what you want? Do you want Skynet? And then here's kind of my final thought on it. Once they run the 5 things every week through an AI, and if they can actually make everybody at will and fire everybody, which there's going to be some benefits, but some good people are going to get let go too. If they're not going to do the top-down approach of actually going through everyone's reviews properly, nobody's going to want to work for the government anymore unless they pay 30 to 40 more percent. The government has always existed employment-wise as a place for people to go to make a little bit less but have a lot more job security. If they take away that job security, and if they don't find a way to get all the boomers to retire, the government is going to just be the most useless place to work, and it's going to be the most ineffective thing on the planet. And it seems like that's what they want. If the government is so damn ineffective and useless, this shouldn't nearly be as big of a problem as they're making it out to be. And I feel like just with everything else, the truth is kind of somewhere in the middle. Clearly, if you go to r/Fed News, you see a bunch of lefty-loos losing their fucking minds. And if you go on Twitter, you see a bunch of Musk bots orbiting his Twitter, polishing him off, acting like everybody's fucking useless. Meanwhile, none of them have a full-time job, and they all suck him off with their blue checks, orbiting him all day. So just like everything else, like, the truth is in the middle. Obviously, there's a bunch of socialites, like, that would rather go back to the office. They don't actually give a shit about staying home. They want to go back in the office. It's always been that way. And if we had got Cackles McGee, we would be seeing them all go back in the office anyway. The left was trying to get them all back in the office years ago. They just lacked, the flamethrower to make it happen. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, and I think that's why Orange Man is trying to rein Musk back, and I think he's successfully done it at this point. I think the five things a week is going to quietly go away. I think the budget they want to do, hey Spoopy, they want to do a 1-year budget. I think some of them are pushing for like a much more brief, like a budget stopgap. I forgot what it's called. But I think what we're going to see is somewhere in the middle, because it's still probies getting let go, and it's still probies coming back. Like, they're going to have to do a bigger riff through Congress. They're going to have to do a bigger reorg. I think that's going to happen. And I think some of the 3 letters are going to go to sleep. Maybe the IRS, hopefully the ATF, hopefully the EPA, hopefully, a lot of these that we don't really need. If we do like the factory reboot, like I'm talking about, what you end up with, is you end up with ICE and Homeland, and very few other agencies. We need to keep the power on. We need to keep the sewer going and stuff, but let's not like pretend that the EPA has done an amazing job at keeping ecological disasters in check. But that's a whole other story. You could still have subject matter experts and consultants. Like, let's not pretend the Department of Transportation wasn't having trains magically derail in towns and poisoning their towns. So I think you could have a Department of Transportation that is lean and mean and kicks ass and jumps in where it needs to. Like, I think you could have a lean, mean EPA that helps out where it needs to. But the problem is like you got to be able to rebuild trust, and you have to get them sustainable. And I think it's tough to rebuild that trust. So, but make no mistake, having corporations in charge of all of this, corporations are not a meritocracy either. They get to decide what's important and what's not important, and it's only going to be what directly benefits them the most. If Musk actually gave a shit, there would be an alternative to Kindle. If he actually wanted to be that disruptive, he would have had parallel payment processing systems. Okay, and he doesn't, because he's a PayPal junkie that they directly need the banks to exist, or their advertising revenue and payments and everything fall apart. He is fake. He has always been fake, and he is a big grifter. And again, I think he had some people he wanted to go after too. He wanted to go after the FCC because of Starlink. He wants to replace NASA. I'm sure he wants every government contractor and every government employee to be driving a Tesla. Yeah, SpaceX, I said that. So let's not pretend that if Musk was in charge, that huge chunks of the government wouldn't immediately just turn into different organizations of his Tesla stuff. So is that better or worse? Like, that's subjective, I think. But the reality is the corporations would not be any better than having the government in charge of anything. And for all intents and purposes, since corporations have lobbies that directly tell the government what to do because of their funds, that this hasn't been a corptocracy for a long time. And I'm legitimately surprised it wasn't like CDC sponsored by Pfizer, NASA sponsored by SpaceX, Department of Transportation sponsored by the train company. You don't want corporations in charge. I guess I'll leave with this, and then I'll put my final thoughts in here. If you had pure anarcho, corptocracies, anarcho capitalism, pure capitalism, that would be a discussion worth having. Okay, where you can decide to send your kids to Microsoft school or send your kids to Twitter school. But we don't have that now. That's not what this is, and that's not what this is ever going to be. Pure anarchy in its purest form, you don't want that either. And you don't want pure tyranny, because that's way too easy of a direction to go. And pure communism, everyone just starves to death. So we have to just be able to find a way to where we just get back to sustainability. And I wouldn't want to unemploy millions and millions and millions of people, but unless they end the Fed, which is what they're calling as well, unless they end the Fed, the only way we get back to a sustainment model is if they lower interest rates and unemploy the shit out of people and somehow get all the boomers to stop sitting on their houses till the end of time, and get all the boomers that have soft retired but won't leave their job positions Like, if you don't figure out ways to tackle all that stuff, this is just a bubble waiting to burst. But I don't think taxing boomers back to the Stone Age on this bloated wealth of their houses is is the way to go either. Whoops, sorry. So phone went to sleep. So I don't know. I think, but I think this is kind of maybe I've said this a couple of times. I think this is like my last episode about this. I think Musk has been put in his place. I think the chips are going to fall where they do on the budget, and I think this is all going to quietly go into the sunset because Musk did probably what they intended him to do, which is just stir up a bunch of chaos to distract people. And now I think things are going to slowly fall into like a natural rhythm when everyone's going to calm down and there's going to be some reorgs and it's going to go through Congress and things are going to slow down, but they're going to be more methodical. There's still going to be crazy disruptions. It's just going to be slower and more methodical disruptions. And now you're going to start to see some of the agencies start to close. And I think you're going to see other agencies start to actually gain more traction and gain more power. Whether that's good or bad, we'll see. But I think this is going to be my last episode about this because I think we've come full circle. I think Musk has been deflated, and I think this all ran its course. Now we'll just see how the budget. I'll still talk about the budget stuff because whatever happens with that, I think is going to be interesting. But I think we're done seeing chaotic disruptions, and I think we're going to start seeing more strategic disruptions. Whether or not that's going to lean more towards like a corporatocracy, I think is going to depend. I think it's going to depend on how much money keeps getting pumped through the system. So I'll end that there. I just want to say, kind of on a different, more somber note, spend more time with the people that you love. Every time you see people, every time you say stuff, think about if that's the last time you see them, if that's the note you want to leave on, because when all this is said and done, and when everything goes to hell, which it will, and it already has for a lot of people, all of this petty, stupid shit is going to be completely irrelevant. And you will have wished that you took one more picture with the people that you love, that you hugged them one last time, that you told them what you really felt. Because we're all absolutely fucked. Make no mistake about it. Spend time with the people who matter and doing things that matter. Don't worry about work. Don't worry about bills. Like, obviously be responsible, but like, spend time with the people that you love. This chaos and this burnout and shit is not good for your health. Time is gonna keep going, and you can't stop to freak out about chaos. It is all a distraction to keep you from things that are actually important. So tell people how you really feel, and obviously be mature about it. Hug the people that you love if they're if they're those type of people. Don't let this fleeting moment keep you from living life. Way too many people, this has just stopped their life. and your job is not that important. The three-letter agencies aren't that important, and the corporation that you work at's not that important. What's important is spending time with the people that you care about and telling them how you feel. So, and get good sleep and eat healthy and just take care of yourselves. Stop living in the news and stop doom scrolling. And these people, they don't want you to live your life. They want you stirred up in infinite chaos. They want you to waste your fucking weekends. They want you to not spend time with people that you care about. And that meme always goes around. It's like, your kids aren't going to care someday that you like put in 2 hours of OT or something. Like, they're going to care about how much time you spent with them if you put them first. And I can't tell you how many times throughout life I've put my life aside to try to get a little bit further in work, to try to work just a little bit harder. And it has never once fucking worked out for me in my entire life. Because all it does is indicate to them that they can just take advantage of you more and not compensate you as much. And I feel like that is why we're in this endless loop, stuck working with total fucking retards who don't do anything. And those people never get cut. They never get let go. All they do is fail up. Because they have mastered the art of like being at work all day and not having to do anything. And this has been going on my whole life, my dad's whole life. It doesn't matter if you're in the office or not. Surrounded by people who just like do not fucking work. The rest of us cut the slack. We get it done. We are always the ones who get cut. So live your life, take your vacation, take your sick days, spend time with the people that you care about, because none of this in the grand scheme of things matters. There's always going to be more emergencies. There's always going to be more wars. You got to get prepared emotionally and spiritually and build the bonds with the people around you and take care of yourself. Take care of yourselves. Take care of the people that matter. These corporations don't matter. They don't give a shit about you. Only your family does. All these people turning on their families because they voted this way or that way, even though a lot of them still like live with each other, that's fucking idiotic. But together, put away your hatred of Orange Man or your hatred of Cackles or whoever it is you hate. Put all your hate away and realize that the people next to you is all that you have. In the end, that's all that you have. Don't forget that. Take care of each other and take care of yourselves. Bye.